Assembly Member Silva notices the absence of a quorum. Will the sergeants please prepare the chambers and bring in the absent members? The clerk will call the roll.
Adams, Amiano, Anderson, Arambula, Bell, Bill Berryhill, Tom Berryhill, Blakesley, Block, Blumenfield, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Caballero, Calderon, Carter, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Cotto, Davis, De La Torre, De Leon, DeVore, Emerson, Ing, Evans, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Fuller, Furutani, Gaines, Galgiani, Garrick, Gilmore, Hagman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Liu, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mendoza, Miller, Monning, Nava, Nastande, Nilo, Nilsson, John A. Perez, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Ruskin, Salas, Saldana, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Strickland, Swanson, Torlickson, Torres, Tarico, Tran, Valines, Yamada. Madam Speaker.
Members, a quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the gallery and in the rear of the chambers to please stand. We'll ask Assemblyperson Brownlee to lead us in the prayer this morning. Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you. Father, for this new day with its promise and potential, we thank you. May our part in this day be full of meaning and hope for others. May our efforts and our words be characterized by kindness and give expression to the goodwill and truth that is within us. May they also be the key which unlocks the good and truth in others. Amen.
Amen. We ask our guests and visitors in the gallery in the rear to remain standing, and we're going to have our flag salute by Assemblymember Fong. Thank you. You may be seated. We have the reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Wednesday, January 6, 2010. The Assembly met at 12 noon.
Mr. Rico moves and Mr. Blakely seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Message from the governor, there are none. Message from the Senate, there are none. Move to motions and resolutions. Please note the absences for the day are the Honorable Lori Saldana and Amina Carter. Mr. Gilmore, members, we have special guests in the chambers. Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, yesterday our governor and this chamber paid tribute to the veterans of this great country, those that are serving not only here on our homeland, but those that have returned from Afghanistan and Iraq, America's first line of defense against the acts of terrorism. And today, I have the honor, the distinct privilege of introducing members in the galley up here from the post, the Peace Officer Standards Training Leadership Institute. There are 24 members representing 22 police agencies in the state of California in our gallery up here. They were hand-selected by their respective agencies. They're going through extensive training and leadership. They're the future leaders of law enforcement agencies throughout the state of California. They're our pride of our state. They put their lives on the line each and every day for the safety of our families. Would you please join me in welcoming them to our chambers today? Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the chambers. Welcome. Mr. Tarico, for what purpose?
Under motions and resolutions, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, sir.
Hereby request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Member John Perez to have guests and photographers on the floor this morning.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Member Yamada and others to speak on an adjourned in memory today of Mr. Bill Cavallo.
Without objection. Thank you, sir. Members, we are going to move very quickly to adjourn in memories. Madam Speaker.
Members, we want to adjourn in memory today for an individual that I think many people in this body knew and some people knew for many, many years, and is a tremendous loss to our Sacramento community. I'm standing to adjourn in memory of Bill Cavallo, who served in and around this institution for 30-plus years. Bill was a key staffer for 7 speakers, starting with Willie Brown. He also served as the Speaker Office of Member Services Director on 3 different occasions. And the fact he was able to navigate through so many different speakers with such different styles and personalities is one testament to his many gifts. He was a brilliant strategist for Democrats and a passionate believer in the democratic values that got us elected to office. But he was well respected and liked across the aisle. As former Senator Jim Brulte wrote in the Bee, Bill Cavallo was a fierce adversary, but a polite and honorable man. Bill Cavallo loved teaching in the classroom, in the office, and in the field. And it is to the benefit of this House and the benefit of this state that so many who learned from Bill Cavallo are still with us, including some members here today, who would be somewhere else if it were not for Bill Cavallo's life work and commitment to the political process. I ask that you join me in adjourning in his memory.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I, too, rise with a heart full of sadness but full of respect for Dr. William L. Cavallo, who did pass away 2 days after Christmas, December 26th. In Sacramento, he was 66 years of age. As the Speaker just mentioned, I would not be here today without Bill Cavallo. I first met him in March of 2007, and so I did not have the opportunity to know him as long as many of you. But I can say unequivocally that without him, I would not be wearing this assembly pin today. And so it is with a heart full of respect that I ask that we join all of those listening today, inside and outside the chamber, that we remember him, thank him for his service to 7 speakers in this California legislature. And just on a side note, much has been written about Bill in the past several days. There are many stories. I know that this won't be the end of the memorial adjournments. I hope that we'll be gathering somewhere that he would appreciate also to remember him in the near future. But he was described as kind of a political Jedi Knight, one who was feared adversary, but also respected on all sides of the aisles. And for me, his nickname will be Yoda, because in our last email exchanges that occurred on Christmas Eve, I had no idea, of course, that he was as ill as he was. But he was dispensing his advice to me, and he would always answer in characteristic 1, 2, or 3-word phrases. No matter what the public policy or political question it was that I had, if he would wish to have given me more advice, it didn't come across that way. He would always say, fine, do it, or trust yourself. And for that, I will always be grateful. So, members, I ask that you join me today in memorial adjournment for a great California public servant, Bill Cavallo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yamada. Mr. Delatorre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reached out to Bill before I was elected because I had heard how he was the wizard of demographics, California demographics, and he was over in Soames. I went over to visit him in LOB before I was actually elected, and went back and visited him subsequent to that. I didn't work with him on a campaign in the way that others have in this room. But I went there the first time and went back subsequent times because you have a sense of a political person who knows how to put the numbers together to help somebody win in a political context. But if you sat down with Bill, you knew that he understood what was behind those demographics, that there was a community in southeast LA County that may have been Democratic, may have been Republican, but he knew who those people were, who the people were that lived there, what their likes and dislikes were. It was deeper than just numbers and things that you could get from a spreadsheet. He knew, and I think it's partly from decades of political experience of campaigning in all these various parts of the state, but he knew what the people of California were like at a very neighborhood level, at a very small level, whether it was in Northern California, Southern California, any part of the state. And he knew, and he had, again, in very short phrases, terse phrases, he could characterize these communities with very evocative metaphors. So he could say, that's a pickup truck community, or he had these little phrases that he would use to describe what they were, and he could go into a lot of detail about what that community was like. And that I thought that of all the people that I've come across in Sacramento, he had the best connection to the people of California at a very local level. And that's what I appreciated about him. I appreciated that there was somebody around here that had that kind of deep connection up and down the state of California. And for that, I will sincerely miss Bill Cavallo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delatorre. Mrs. Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I was so shocked when I heard that Bill Cavallo had passed, because he was my consultant, and I too had, like Mariko, been in communication with him very, very close to the date of his death, and had no idea that he had been ill, although the last time that I saw him, which was about a month ago, I looked at him and I had noticed that he had lost a lot of weight and he had a very gray color to him, and I felt that he must be ill in some way. But Bill was a very, very private man, and he never disclosed very much about himself. But one thing that you'll hear, I'm sure, that as the people get up and speak about him, is that he was a great studier of human behavior. And I think that he really loved people, because when I started thinking about his passing and how it really shook me up, and it shook me up because I didn't have an opportunity to tell him how much I really appreciated that he put so much faith in me. Because the way that I met Bill is in a way that so many of us in this room that had the opportunity to work with him did. And that's that you did not choose Bill as a consultant. Bill chose you. And I'm very proud to be in that category of people that he wanted to work with. Because when I first met him, it was somebody that called me up and said, would you be interested in running for assembly? I had no intention at that point in time to run. And they said, Bill Cavallo is going to be in town, and Bill Cavallo wants to talk to you. And they said, when you sit down and you meet with Bill, you're going to have to pay very close attention, because he speaks in a very low voice, and sometimes you can't always understand all the words that he's saying. And it was really true. I sat next to him, and I found myself leaning into him to listen to him closely to everything that he had to say. He was interviewing me. I wasn't interviewing him. And I hung on his every word, and what amazed me was that he was such a reader of humankind, and that he convinced me that I would be a very good fit for that district, and that the candidate that was indeed the one that was out there and being supported by the assembly member that was here before me was not the right fit for that district. And so he actually gave me a lot of confidence to run for a position that I wasn't thinking about running for. And he was very well thought of in San Diego, and he's responsible, I think, for turning San Diego from a Republican county relative to representation here in the Assembly and in the Senate, from being Republican dominated to Democratic. And he consulted women before me that I have great admiration for: Lucy Kalea, Dee Dee Albert, Chris Kehoe, Susan Davis. So many strong, intelligent women of integrity. And so that he chose to work with me, that he chose to work with Mariko, that he chose to work with Ana Caballero. It's a great compliment to us, but I think it's a testimony to the strong women that we are.
Thank you, Mrs. Salas. Ms. Caballero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's interesting listening to everybody's story, because it's astounding how similar it is, and how similar it is in terms of our shock as well. None of us knew that Bill Cavallo was ill. He was a rock upon which we depended. He was the kind of individual that you could call up at any time, day or night, and he had, as was articulated, a terse one or two word comment to make. But you know, I have to agree with what Ms. Salas said. I think he was a real student of people, and that despite the fact that he worked in a back room somewhere most of his life, and he was like the wizard behind the curtain, helping people and making things happen, you never saw him, but you knew he was there. And he had an incredible depth of information going back to the 70s about politics and about districts and about the state and about neighborhoods and about what people thought. And that was important to him, because he had a deep, deep respect for this institution. Despite the fact that he never, ever wanted to run for public office, he thought it was among the highest calling, and that if he could help us to be better elected officials, that was his job. And so his door was always open, whether it was to talk about redistricting issues, whether it was to talk about the kinds of legislation that we were interested in. One of the first things that Bill Cavallo did when I got elected and we sat down, and he was my consultant, again, he picked me. And I'm very proud of that, because we worked very well together, and he had a real true appreciation and respect for grassroots organizing, which is what I wanted to do. And he never stepped into the efforts at the local level to empower people, and he thought that was real important. And as a consultant, many just don't get it. They think it all happens up at a different level, but Bill understood. But one of the first things he did when we were talking about the kinds of legislation that was going to be important is he said, you have to learn about water. And at the time, I didn't know a whole heck of a lot. As a matter of fact, I knew nothing about statewide water issues. But he said that's going to be the number one issue that's going to affect your community and most rural communities, and so you need to learn about water. And he was absolutely right. And that was the kind of advice, the kind of mentoring, the kind of support that he gave, as he then turned me on to people who could talk about water and who knew about it and could educate me. Bill will be sorely missed. He was so incredibly passionate about the work that we do that there will be a hole in terms of information and historical memory. And you know, when you look around and you see that the most senior among us anywhere is probably someone who's over in the Senate that is, or someone that's back here from the Senate that spends they're in their 13th year or something. It's not a long time. Bill could go back 30 years and he could tell you exactly what was happening 30 years ago, who was in power, what their their strengths were and what the weaknesses is in the change in our Constitution. He was a master at all of that because he had seen it, he had lived it, and he had participated in it. And so it's with great sadness, but deep respect that I ask you to adjourn in memory of Bill Kavala.
Thank you. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, it's so hard because so many people that have been so important to me in my life now go on to, I guess, a better life. But Bill is part of an extraordinary period in California politics. Willie Brown was the first speaker to be elected with Republican votes, more Republican votes than Democratic votes. And Bill Kavala was part of that staff, part of that group that helped to make that happen. You know, I'm a big believer about the roles of staff in relation to members, but that by no means it should be understood to say that staff does not put its imprint on California history. When Willie was elected, he, in true form, had decided that he would elect the A team, the best and the brightest of all members that would reflect his intelligence, his skill, his vision, and his genius. And he did. He selected a very impressive group of freshmen. After he did, and Bill helped do that. After I went to talk to Bill, and I said, well, I guess Willie's happy with the outcome of the elections. And he says, well, actually, he's not. And I said, well, why is that? I said, well, because I think now he's at risk of being overturned by the freshmen, and they might elect a new speaker. And the thing about Bill is that it doesn't matter where the political fighting is going on, what side he is on. I mean, he's loyal, picks a side, and he stays there. But the one thing about Bill is, and I've learned from that, is that if you bother to stop and ask him for his advice, sincerely ask for his advice, he always gave you his best. He always told you what he thought, and irrespective of what the issue was and who was on what side or anything else. But if you asked him, he would tell you in that quiet voice what he thought. And he was an amazing strategist. And of course, in that time, he and Richie Ross were just such a powerhouse. Still is, in the case of Richie, but don't tell him. So Bill he's dedicated to public service, and he has made his mark on California's future, California's past. And he should be remembered. There is a rule, in quantum physics, there is a rule known as the rule of uncertainty, and it contains a principle that nothing exists until it is observed. Well, by definition, once something is remembered, it will always continue to exist. And in the case of Bill Kavala, if we remember him, he will continue to live. And that's why the Speaker will ask the Rules Committee to name the Soames Conference Room after Bill Kavala. Bill, we will miss you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a great honor to stand before you to join in the request for adjourn in memory for Bill Kavala. As a young organizer more than 30-something years ago, I would ask the question, why am I knocking on this door or walking this precinct? And the field director would say, well, because Kavala said this is the door we have to knock on to win the election. And at the time, as a young person, not really knowing Bill Cavallo. Later, learning who he was and working with him, I learned to appreciate his genius and the reason why he was loved by his friends, respected by his enemies. In the mid-'70s, I had a chance to run Judge Lionel Wilson's campaign to become the first African-American mayor for the city of Oakland, and it was Bill Cavallo's behind-the-scenes strategic thinking, strategies, and that assisted that campaign. And so it is really impressive to learn that he didn't just belong to Oakland and Alameda County, but he had these ties throughout the state. And so I'm proud to join my colleagues in a journey in this political giant. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We're now going to move on to the business of the day. And before we move to our most important business item, which is the election of a new speaker, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes just to thank everyone in the Assembly for the privilege of serving as your speaker. We have been through some incredibly tough times together. It has been a heck of a 2-year ride. And as we fought to keep the state from going over a cliff, your support, encouragement, and your prayers have certainly been what has been most important to me, to allow me to lead through these tough times. But it's also been important to everybody in this House, and it has helped us to get through this time period. I'm very proud of our House, frankly. I'm proud of our level of bipartisan cooperation and what we've accomplished together, the way that we get along across the aisle, no matter what our political perspective is. We know that we are all in this fight together to make sure that we can improve the quality of life for all of California, but also to get through such a tough time. And I want to thank, in particular, the Republican leaders, former leader Mike Valines and current leader Sam Blakesley, for their cooperation and spirit of friendship that as we have sat together through many, many hours of negotiations and the way that we all worked and cooperated together. And so it has been my pleasure to serve. And frankly, I look forward shortly, not too soon, of moving into a new status where I'll be Speaker Emeritus. And I have to tell you that when I worked through transition with former Speaker Fabian Nunez, I was jealous for that role. That seemed like a really nice role to be Speaker Emeritus, but I do want to tell you that I've been told that emeritus is a Latin word, and for me, that word is going to mean that I'm not going to leave this building until I find some justice for foster kids. So thank you very much for the honor of serving. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Jim Bell's over there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Now let me move on to motions and resolutions, and let me say that the nominations are open for the office of Speaker. Assemblymember Chuck Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I rise today to nominate John Perez for Speaker of the California Assembly to be sworn in at a regular floor session convened by the Speaker pursuant to the Assembly rules or upon a vacancy, whichever occurs first. You know, today I feel so privileged and I feel proud to have this honor. Privileged because today marks a turning point towards a better future for all Californians, and proud to see my friend of over 12 years take his place on the front page and then in the next chapter of California history. Now, having served with 7 Assembly Speakers, I've had the opportunity to see what it takes to be a leader of leaders. More important, what it takes to be a good leader. Clearly, John has the ability, the qualities to become a good speaker, but I honestly believe, I truly believe he's more than that. I believe he has the ability to be one of the most effective speakers in California history. Let me tell you why. For those of you who do not know John, his character, intellect, and skill are intact. He is tough, genuine, empathetic, compassionate, fair, witty, keenly analytical, intellectual, respectful, engaging, articulate, tolerant, and collaborative. That should take care of me. But I mention those simply because those are skills that you use every day when you're dealing with your peers and your leader attempting to provide some kind of direction for other leaders. And you need to have that to build the trust, to build the confidence, to build the relationship, to build the ability to be able to overcome our philosophical differences. And I believe John has those qualities. All of these attributes, so important for leading this house, are values and skills that were honed on the streets of East Los Angeles and born from a personal calling to help the sick, the poor, the disadvantaged, and the working class. And of course, to state the obvious, without effective leadership, we cannot begin to address the monumental issues facing us as a body and facing California in the upcoming years. So we need, most importantly, a leader who has a personal, demonstrated understanding of challenges which face families every day as they struggle to survive, and whose life has been dedicated to meeting those challenges with a job, self-determination, opportunity, and hope. Of course, John is no stranger to helping to create jobs. He sat on the Planning Commission, the Los Angeles Community Redevelopment Commission. He has already brought thousands of jobs to Southern California. I believe that it is this skill, this experience, this character that can help us, can help both parties, can help the legislature and help the governor meet the most important challenge facing California, and that is putting people back to work, finding jobs for people so that they can build their lives and follow their dreams. But John has more than that. He has the ability to bridge philosophical and ideological schisms. For example, in addition to serving on the Planning Commission or Redevelopment Commission, he was also on the board of the California League of Conservation Voters. Now think about that. Land use and environment. And has been able to function effectively in both areas. He has many other accolades and boards and members, name a few. Former board member on the Coro Foundation to help young, new leaders in California or in this country. He recently joined the California Forward panel on initiative reform. We could go on. I don't have enough time. But my point here is that John has the ability to work with people of all points of view to find common ground and leads to a better quality of life for all and building a California that's big enough for all of us. Please join me and let's elect John Perez, Speaker-elect of the California Assembly.
Members, this nomination requires a second. Assemblymember Hayashi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm honored to second the nomination of John Perez as the next Speaker of the California State Assembly. We live in an amazing time where barriers continue to be broken and milestones are being reached. We have been part of some very historic moments here, ones that inspire and give us hope for the better future. We had the privilege of electing the first African-American woman Speaker of this great state, Karen Bass. She led us with strength and the utmost dedication, protecting California's children and families through our most difficult times. Thank you, Speaker Bass. We also had the honor of electing the first African-American president of the United States, President Barack Obama. His inauguration and the emotions of that day will be forever remembered by all of us. And these events have been significant markers of change, and today we have the opportunity to to facilitate another moment of hope, one that we could look forward with energy and confidence to making things better for California's families. Influenced by his family's working class values, Assemblymember Perez has led an inspirational life, one that has affected so many people and made a difference in so many lives. His leadership and determination has helped working families to obtain fair wages, gain access to health care, and organize together for safer homes and workplaces. And by dedicating his career to serving others, he gave a voice to the underrepresented and encouraged them to actively shape the course of their community's future. I appreciate what Assemblymember Perez has done for immigrants and other underserved communities. As a first-generation Korean American and the first woman in my family to go to college, I know well that equality, fairness, and the opportunities that come with them are only possible because of hardworking advocates like Mr. Perez. He's someone who will continue to inspire others to help people, as he has done throughout his life. He will carry out his responsibilities with dignity and strength and champion our values and issues with much success. And I look forward with great anticipation and optimism to working with Mr. Perez as the new Speaker for California. Thank you.
Assemblymember Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for your eloquent remarks at the commencement of this meeting, and I know I will join with you on the foster care issue gladly. And John A. Perez, I've known him for a year now, known about him for longer. As the soon-to-be elected new chair of the LGBT caucus, I know I speak for that community when I say what a significant day it is to have lived long enough to see this ascension. Democracy is not always pretty. It's pretty messy sometimes, but it works. John, as a gay man, will probably be subject to a certain kind of scrutiny that would make a lesser person uncomfortable. John knows who he is. He knows about his Latino heritage. He knows about negotiation. He has an insatiable curiosity for factoids, sometimes arcane, sometimes not. He has a great sense of irony and a great sense of humor, and you need that in your armament to be a speaker. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to second the nomination of John A. Perez. This is a real mitzvah. Thank you.
Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you, Madam Speakers and members. It is my distinct honor and personal pleasure to rise and second the nomination of the Honorable John A. Perez as Speaker of the California State Assembly. We stand at yet another pivotal moment in California's history. Never have the challenges been so great or the stakes so high for our beloved state. And never have I seen the need for Californians to rise to these great challenges. And never have I been so pleased to stand here with my colleagues and support a fellow son of California as the next Speaker of the Assembly. As Mr. Perez has demonstrated through a lifetime of work fighting for California families and through the great leadership that he has shown and demonstrated since joining the Assembly as the caucus chair, as a negotiator, as a bridge builder, I am confident that under the leadership of Speaker Perez, with the partnership of our Republican Party and Republican leader and the colleagues, no challenge facing our state will be too great. His ability to advocate for working families and fighting for a safer environment and a cleaner environment, while at the same time understanding the need to create jobs and stabilize our economy, has been outstanding. Madam Speaker, thank you for your unquestioned leadership and your heartfelt friendship and for your deep love of this great state. Mr. Perez, with our hard work, great days lie ahead for California, and I want to thank you for all of your leadership, your dedication, and your support for the people of the state of California. Thank you so much.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. It is an honor to serve with you, Madam Speaker, and it is an honor and a privilege to second the nomination of my friend John Perez as our next Speaker. Much has been said today about John and his place in leadership, his accomplishments, his talents, and his place in history. There is much more about John that needs to be said, so we clearly understand that we are electing a man who has earned these accolades and this place at this time. John has earned this next step in his life, this next leadership role, this next opportunity to be leader of the State Assembly through action and through commitment to helping his community and those who have needed his help throughout California. It's easy to see why during these challenging times, when so many Californians need all of us to help our collective communities, that we would turn to someone who has been personally touched by so many of the issues and institutions that are front and center in our current debate to be our next leader. John understands the same challenges that so many Californians face in their own personal lives because he was there himself. A child of humble, hard-working immigrants, John is a proud product of our public schools, a graduate of Franklin High School and UC Berkeley, the crown jewel of the Master Plan for Higher Education. John knows and understands public education not as a politician, but as someone who sees the opportunity to succeed when that opportunity was properly funded and our children were afforded the opportunity to follow their dreams. Like his mother, Vera, who earned the respect of her coworkers, who saw her rise from receptionist to running a community clinic by the time she retired, John has paid his dues and has earned the respect of his colleagues and this institution. At 14, he joined the Northeast Democratic Club and impressed the many adults as he tirelessly walked precincts. I recently saw him return to that club to install its new slate of officers, and I watched as John remembered the members who awarded him a scholarship 25 years ago. He gave his time as a youth, and he gave his respect as a returning public official. As a student activist and class president, he organized students to oppose a proposed East Los Angeles prison. Today, we grapple with prison reform, an unconscionable recidivism rate, and underserved communities who are overrepresented in our prison population. Who better to turn to now than someone who understood this issue at 15? John understands the impact of our current budget crisis on our safety net from his own personal story. As a boy, his own family faced the closure of his mother's clinic and his father's social service lifeline. He knows that those amongst us who need us most are not just statistics, but real Californians facing real struggles. And he worked to increase democracy through more representation in underrepresented neighborhoods through his work at UC Berkeley's voter registration programs. Yes, it has been pointed out that working Californians have benefited from John's commitment to the labor movement. From the drywallers to the UFCW, countless Californians have benefited from John's legacy. Today, we proudly ask John Perez to do even more. We are faced with a serious budget crisis. We are faced with an electorate that wants us to solve problems and rekindle the optimism and promise that California has made to past generations. True to John Perez, as he has done for the past 25 years, he says yes today to these challenges. And he has done for the past 24 years. He will rise to meet these challenges. I proudly second the nomination of John Perez, and I share the collective optimism and collective hope by knowing we are electing someone who cares, someone who understands, and someone who leads.
Assemblymember De Leon.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
I too rise with my colleagues to second the nomination of John Perez to be our next Assembly Speaker. As we all know, at a very deeply personal level, we're facing the most unprecedented financial crisis in the history of this great state. Due to the Wall Street meltdown, the subprime debacle, we have made very, very painful and difficult choices. And this upcoming year, as well as the next year, we'll be making even much more difficult decisions. They're going to pain each and every one of us. I think more than ever in the history of this institution, more than ever in the history of this institution, we need a united body. And that's just not Democrats, but that's Democrats as well as Republicans, to bring prosperity back to this golden state, the greatest state in the Union, the 8th largest economy in the entire world. And the one individual who I believe can bring this together, again, and I want to underscore and emphasize, just not Democrats, but Republicans, a legislative body that's united together, forging, working together to bring prosperity back to each and every one of us, the working class, the middle class, those who have been marginalized, left on the margins. That man is John A. Perez. John grew up in my district, the 45th Assembly District, and went to Franklin High School, as was referenced by Mr. Portantino. So this is a district that's multifaceted and multi-ethnic. It's a district that's a working class district. And as a young man, such as myself, he grew up in a working class family, the son of immigrant parents. And this is an individual who I believe has been showered with many accolades by colleagues who stood up today to speak towards his person, his character. This is an individual without question, has the temerity, has the temperament, he has the intelligence, he has the political skill to move forward to be a very effective speaker for this legislative body. Now, this is an individual, again, as was referenced by Mr. Calderon a little earlier today, who has created jobs as a commissioner for the CRA in Los Angeles. That unique skill in creating jobs in a time like this, with also the ability to know how to bargain collectively, will be very, very important tools and skills that this legislative body will need, as well as the state of California. The ability to know how to bargain collectively for the most downtrodden in California. The ability to know how to create jobs, to bring prosperity, to bring tax revenue into the state of California. The funny thing is that Los Angeles, obviously by far and large, except perhaps one or two cases, usually creates Democrats, and by far and large, very, very progressive Democrats. John Perez is, like myself, a progressive Democrat, but he's also an individual who is a pragmatic progressive. He understands the real politic of getting things done, and that is the bottom line. Now, we were in a contested, very spirited race, and I think that race brought out the best in each and every one of us. And it brought out the best in each and every one of our own colleagues, in particular our Democratic colleagues. And for that reason, I stand in solidarity with you, John Perez, as we work together and as we move this state forward together. And I'm proud to nominate you as the 68th Assembly Speaker of this great institution. Congratulations.
Assemblymember Skinner.
I am honored to rise to second the nomination of John Perez as our next speaker. What prompted those of us who encouraged John to seek this position, and then, once he decided, to support him, are his natural leadership abilities. He is, in plain fact, a natural leader. He can't help himself. We Californians are in the midst of perilous times, and such times require an extraordinary person. And that's what John is. You have to be somebody extraordinary to rise to the top so quickly, and what some saw as so unexpectedly. And yet, in fact, that was with seeming ease, because that support came to him so easily because of those innate leadership qualities. And that's what caused people to basically move towards him. My colleagues have spoken to many of John's qualities that will make John, as a speaker, someone that all of us in this House will be proud of, and that all of California and all of Californians will be proud of. His temperament, his inclusiveness, his wit, his negotiating abilities, his intelligence, his trustworthiness. Finally, today, we have the opportunity to make the most of the constraints that we, in a term limit environment, just must live in. And that is that we have the opportunity today to elect a speaker who has the possibility of serving with us for 5 years. And by doing so, has the ability to grow on the job at the same time as providing stability and coherence to the leadership in this House and to the leadership for all of California. And it's an opportunity that in this economic crisis will help us in this that will in this economic crisis give us the kind of stable leadership that enables us to work together and live through the long haul without interruption to the day that all of us experience California having once again a healthy economy. We Californians will be proud, and as a nod to our common alma mater, go Bears.
Are there any further nominations for the office of Speaker? Assemblymember Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to place the nomination of Sam Blakesley into the nomination for Speaker of the Assembly. We have the chance today to chart a course toward economic prosperity, to lay out a plan to bring jobs to California and to revitalize our economy and spend within our means. Times of crisis produce opportunities to make tough decisions when they're needed. Those decisions that really just aren't a priority in the good times. And Sam Blakesley has the ability and the background to help guide our state into making government smaller, more accountable, more transparent, and more responsive to its people. We have seen through the good work of the Accountability and Administrative Oversight Committee that there are a host of places that we can cut and streamline before we give pink slips to teachers, shortchange our seniors or foster youth, or jeopardize our public safety. During his time as Republican leader, Sam Blakesley has shown that he can pull together a bipartisan coalition, work with all sides, and craft a compromise. We need that type of person at the helm, steering California's return to greatness. This vote for Speaker today is about laying out an agenda that will lead California's economic recovery, reining in the bloated bureaucracy, and focusing on an agenda to keep jobs in California, to bring jobs to California, and grow jobs in California. The overwhelming majority of Californians are simply trying to pay their bills, to feed their kids, to survive just one more month. And under the leadership of Sam Blakesley, we have the opportunity to improve the quality of life for our hardworking families by bringing back business to California so that every capable man and woman that wants a job can get a job. And under Sam's leadership, we will see a California that closely guards the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars and prioritizes our spending on those things that matter most: seniors, foster children, law enforcement, and a strong public education system. You know, we all talk a big game about reform and about change, but right now we have the chance to do something about it. If this too is your agenda, I ask you to cast your vote for Sam Blakesley for Speaker of the Assembly.
Assemblymember Smythe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I rise to second the nomination for Assemblymember Sam Blakesley. But before I do that, I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for your years of service through the very difficult times that we faced. And certainly it hasn't gone unnoticed and certainly appreciated by all members of this House. But as we stand today to elect a new Speaker, to me, Sam Blakesley has demonstrated over his last several years here in the legislature as one who can lead California and lead this House into this most pivotal time in our history. Mr. Blakesley's background and education has set him up perfectly to lead this House. Not only does he have a PhD, but Mr. Blakesley also is a business owner and has had experience not only signing the back of a check, but the front of a check. And that is a critical experience that we need to have. Mr. Blakesley also has not only created jobs, but actually has given people jobs and employed people in this state. And he knows firsthand the challenges that any business owner, large or small, faces when they try to locate here or expand here in California. He also is very well versed on our education system, not as a politician, but also as a parent. Like many of us here, he has children in our school system. And so we have obviously a vested interest, not only for the future of our state, but the future of his children and all of ours. And though you put those backgrounds together, and it creates someone who has distinguished himself as a coalition builder in this House, not only in this House, but in this building. You know, when you've seen coalitions that you would never have thought could come together, Sam Blakesley was able to bring them together. And when else would we need that type of collaborative leadership than right here and right now? And while he's distinguished himself in many areas, one in particular is the balance of our environment and our economy. As the co-founder of the E3 working group, which was designed to develop solutions of our economy, the environment, and energy, Mr. Blakesley worked tirelessly to find that balance. And we had many successes, whether it was from RPS or the Green Chemistry Initiative, which was one that, working with my colleague from Los Angeles, that initially started had two sides together that you never would have thought could have come together. But working and under Sam's leadership, along with our colleague, Mr. Fuhr, put together a coalition that ended up supporting a Green Chemistry Initiative, one that is supported by business, labor, environmental groups, and has really been one of the success stories of this legislature in the past several years. So it is with great honor that I second the nomination of my friend and our colleague, Sam Blakesley.
Assemblymember Nielsen.
Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I rise for twofold purpose. One is to second the nomination of Assembly Republican Leader Blakesley. I also rise to thank you, Madam Speaker, for your good stewardship of this fine institution through this very perilous time. Probably never one so perilous, so aggravating, so difficult. Thank you for your great service. And the torch you pass is a light that burns very brightly and also with great warmth. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, there's a long-standing tradition of this House to members of each party to nominate members of their party in whom they would have greater confidence that their vision, the vision of their party, would be carried out. Their views as to how this state can prosper, expand, and thrive. That is a tradition. And consistent with that tradition, I'm entreating our members to vote for Sam Blakesley today for Speaker. He, as a man who, having been here now 5 years, has demonstrated his leadership capability. And undergirding that leadership capability is his personality. Sam is unassuming, unpretentious, and powerful. Maybe those terms don't quite fit together, but to me they do. That's that quiet hand, the iron fist and the velvet glove. He has those strong values. But he also knows how to relate to and to be empathetic with his fellow human beings, as he has demonstrated to each of you here with whom he has worked over these last 5 years. He is an individual whom you can trust. He is a man of his word. In society today, keeping your word is becoming more rare than it should. We need more who will be those whom you can trust. We believe that we can trust Sam with the stewardship of this institution. He also has that engaging personality and that bit of humor that is so essential in these trying times. You know, we tend to get uptight, and we have these long sessions. To maintain your resolve, your aplomb, your humor is so critical. And Sam has consistently been able to lift us up. And when there are moments of kind of crisis or tension, when the tide can turn one way or the other, to being calm waters or tidal waves, Sam has clearly shown his ability to take us to the more still waters. It is the kind of individual that I think is worthy of leading this institution, and I'm very honored to second his nomination for Speaker of the State Assembly.
Members, are there any further nominations? Seeing none, nominations are now closed. Members, 2 names have been placed in nomination, and that requires an oral roll call vote. So I just want to give everyone the instructions as to how we're going to proceed. The the reading clerk is going to call each member's name, and when your name is called, will you please stand, raise your mic, and say one thing: John Perez or Sam Blakesley. No speeches. And at the end of that, we will have a tally. And of course, my name will be called last. Reading clerk, you can begin.
Adams.
Sam Blakesley.
Adams Blakesley. Amiano.
John A. Perez. Andale.
Amiano John A. Perez. Anderson.
Sam Blakesley.
Anderson Blakesley. Arambula.
John Perez.
Arambula John A. Perez. Bell.
John A. Perez.
Bell John A. Perez. Bill Berryhill.
Sam Blakesley.
Bill Berryhill Blakesley. Tom Berryhill.
Sam Blakesley.
Tom Berryhill Blakesley. Blakesley.
John Perez.
Sam Blakesley.
Blakesley. Blakesley. Block.
John Perez.
Block. John A. Perez. Blumenfield.
A. Perez.
Blumenfield. John A. Perez. Bradford.
John Perez.
Bradford. John A. Perez. Brownlee.
John A. Perez.
Brownlee. John A. Perez. Buchanan.
John A. Perez.
Buchanan. John A. Perez. Caballero.
John A. Perez.
Caballero. John A. Perez. Calderon.
John Perez.
Calderon. John A. Perez. Carter. Chesbro.
Perez.
Chesbro. John A. Perez. Conway.
Sam Blakesley.
Conway. Blakesley. Cook.
Sam Blakesley.
Cook. Blakesley. Cotto.
John Perez.
Cotto. John A. Perez. Davis.
John A. Perez.
Davis. John A. Perez. De La Torre.
John A. Perez.
De La Torre. John A. Perez. De Leon.
John Perez.
De Leon. John A. Perez. DeVore.
Sam Blakesley.
DeVore. Blakesley. Emerson, Ing,
John A. Pettis.
Ing, John A. Perez, Evans,
Proud to vote for John Perez.
Evans, John A. Perez, Fior, John A. Perez, Fletcher, Fong,
John A. Perez.
Fong, John A. Perez, Fuentes,
John Perez.
Fuentes, John A. Perez, Fuller,
Sam Blakesley.
Fuller, Blakesley, Furatani,
John Perez.
Furatani, John A. Perez, Gaines,
Sam Blakesley.
Gaines, Blakesley, Galgiani,
John A. Perez.
Galgiani, John A. Perez, Garrick,
Sam Blakesley.
Garrick, Blakesley, Gilmore,
Sam Blakesley.
Gilmore, Blakesley, Hagman,
Sam N. Blakesley.
Hagman, Blakesley, Hall,
John A. Bettis.
Hall, John A. Perez, Harkey,
Sam Blakesley.
Harkey, Blakesley, Hayashi, John A. Perez, Hernandez,
A. Perez.
Hernandez, John A. Perez, Hill,
John A. Perez.
Hill, John A. Perez, Huber,
John Perez.
Huber, John A. Perez, Huffman,
John Perez.
Huffman, John A. Perez, Jeffries,
Sam Blakesley.
Jeffries, Blakesley, Jones,
John Perez.
Jones, John A. Perez, Knight,
Sam Blakesley.
Knight, Blakesley, Lou,
John A. Perez.
Lou, John A. Perez, Logue,
Sam Blakesley.
Logue, Blakesley, Lowenthal,
John Allen Perez.
Lowenthal, John A. Perez, Ma,
John A. Perez.
Ma, John A. Perez, Mendoza,
John Perez.
Mendoza, John A. Perez, Miller,
Sam Blakesley.
Miller, Blakesley, Monning,
John A. Perez.
Monning, John A. Perez, Nava,
John Perez.
Nava, John A. Perez, Nastande,
Sam Norman Blakesley.
Nastande, Blakesley, Nilo,
Samuel N. Blakesley.
Nilo, Blakesley, Nielsen,
Sam Blakesley.
Nielsen, Blakesley, John A. Perez, John A. Perez, John A. Perez, V. Manuel Perez,
Juan Perez.
V. Manuel Perez, John A. Perez, Portantino,
John Perez.
Portantino, John A. Perez, Ruskin,
Perez.
Ruskin, John A. Perez, Salas,
John Perez.
Salas, John A. Perez, Saldana, Silva,
Sam Blakesley.
Silva, Blakesley, Skinner,
John Perez.
Skinner, John A. Perez, Smythe,
Sam Blakesley.
Smythe, Blakesley, Solorio,
John Perez.
Solorio, John A. Perez, Strickland,
Sam Blakesley.
Strickland, Blakesley, Swanson,
John A. Perez.
Swanson, John A. Perez, Torlixon,
John Perez.
Torlixon, John A. Perez, Torres,
John Perez.
Torres, John A. Perez, Tarico,
John Perez.
Tarico, John A. Perez. Tran,
Sam Blakesley.
Tran, Blakesley. Valines,
Dr. Samuel N. Blakesley.
Valines, Blakesley. Yamada.
Con mucha buena suerte, John A. Perez.
Yamada, John A. Perez. Madam Speaker.
John Allen Perez.
Madam Speaker, John A. Perez.
Members, it'll take a couple of minutes to tally the votes, and we will announce that in a minute. Holding your breath. For Assemblymember John A. Perez, the votes are 48. For Assemblymember Sam Blakesley, the votes are 26. Assemblymember John Perez has been elected Speaker of the California State Assembly. Speaker-elect Perez will be sworn in at a regular floor session to be announced at a later date, and we would like for the Speaker-elect to come forward to the rostrum and have a few words. Yeah. Gone.
Madam Speaker, Republican Leader Blakesley, and my colleagues of the State Assembly, I'd like to express my sincere thanks in the confidence that you've invested in me. I especially want to thank Speaker Bass for her leadership in guiding our House through unprecedented times. She came into office facing more challenges on more fronts than any other speaker in modern history. And she met those challenges head on. I'm grateful for her confidence, for her friendship, and for her leadership. I also want to say how much I'm looking forward to working with Leader Blakesley. He's a talented and dedicated public servant, and I've come to know and respect him a great deal in this past year. This new year brings with it daunting challenges that have fermented for years. And while we're not responsible for the origins of these challenges, we are responsible for their resolution. The present crisis has created a situation where many of our citizens now question whether California is even governable. To put it at its most basic level, the urgency of this moment demands a budget solution that incorporates true and lasting reform. We cannot, must not, and will not allow this moment to pass without answering that demand. This means that my first priority as Speaker is to create a pathway, both in the budget process and more broadly in terms of reforming how government functions here in the state of California. Many of the challenges necessary will require legislative actions, but some will not. I believe our natural starting point comes in how we approve the budget. Members must be included from the outset. We all have a stake in the outcome and will all bear responsibility for the budget we pass. That means that the process must be open, honest, transparent, and inclusive. The Big Five negotiations will be the ending point and not the start. I will present your budget to the Big Five and not present the Big Five's budget to you. I firmly believe that we're equal to the task because we all came to Sacramento with a sincere desire to faithfully serve our state. Over the past year, I've seen us work together to solve vexing local issues, and there's no reason why we cannot work together to solve vexing statewide issues. Foremost amongst those is the issue of jobs. There will be no economic recovery until the job market in California stabilizes and until the unemployment rate comes down. This is a paramount issue for California, and working together, we can make meaningful action to improve the job market and ensure California's economic recovery is strong and broad-based. To my Republican colleagues, I want to say that I know we will not always agree, but I know that we can work together productively. I haven't hesitated to support you on the floor or in committee when I believe that your proposals had merit, and I appreciate that you've shown me the same consideration when you've believed that my legislation has merit. I believe that you have great contributions to make to our state, and I want you to know that while I'm a proud Democrat, I am prouder still to be a speaker for each of you as well. Members, I want to close by thanking you once again for the confidence and trust. This is a historic moment for California, and I know that we have our differences, but we are capable of coming together and producing the necessary body of critical reforms. All this requires is the spirit of courage, of honesty, of openness, to producing reforms each and every one of us can be proud to call our own. Thank you very much. Now let's get to work.
Members, we are finished with our business today. The session schedules is as follows. We will come back into session on Monday, January 11th at noon. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one business item we forgot. We have second reading.
Assembly Bill 41 with amendments.
All bills are deemed read and amendments are adopted. I want to acknowledge Dr. Deborah LeBlanc, who is a member of the Compton College Board, in our gallery. We'll welcome you. And Mr. Tirico moves to adjourn. Mr. Blakesley seconds. This House stands adjourned, and I would invite all members of the legislature to join us downstairs in the governor's press conference room for a press conference to introduce the new Speaker-elect. Thank you very much. See you Monday.